It's going down. Shalom. First and foremost, giving all praises, honor, glory, respect, and blessings to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rachakwadash. Salutations to the Lord's elect on the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth and sincerity while patiently waiting for Yahweh Shai's return. And double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, which have taught us everything we know through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Now, excuse me for that. And welcome to another series of It's Going Down, being brought to you by the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Food crisis is not linked to sanctions, or so the United States say. And you know, we've pretty much been telling you Israelites, you so-called Negro, Latino, and Native Indians, this, man. We've been telling you that these food crises are not linked to sanctions, and that Russia and Ukraine are nothing but scapegoats that these governments around the world, which are being controlled by the so-called elites, are using as an excuse for the growing food crisis around the world. Meanwhile, the Illuminati is using these different governments around the world to burn down food corporations, while they're using the HARP program to manipulate the weather and increase these droughts. So it's not a coincidence that, you know, while they're talking about a food crisis, there's all these different food corporations being burned down to the ground. And meanwhile, while these different food crises are being burned down, food prices are suddenly rising, which is leading to people shoplifting, stealing food. And we all know that a grocery store can only carry up to 3 to 4 days worth of food. So what happens if the shoplifting continues? Eventually, the food shortages in the grocery stores is going to start to grow, and it's not going to stop. So it says Washington claims its restrictions on Russia don't affect the global food market. Despite sounding the alarm about the rising global food prices, the United States has no intention of lifting restrictions on Russian trade. The United States Department spokesman Ned Price told journalists during a daily briefing on Wednesday, Moscow says they affect its ability to export food and fertilizer, but that is a lie, he said. We certainly won't lift our sanctions in response to empty promises, and we've heard empty promises before from the Russian Federation, Price said when asked if Washington would waiver the restrictions that Moscow suggested. The United States accused Russia of causing a surge in food prices by continuing its military action in Ukraine. You see what I mean? You see what I mean? Russia and Ukraine is always the somehow the scapegoat, the go-to for these governments being controlled by the so-called elites when it comes to food prices rising in these different grocery stores. Western nations called on Russia to facilitate the export of grain from Ukraine, but Moscow said, excuse me, it says, but Moscow said, no, Salakia, I'm at work, you know, I've been working overnights all night, so It says, but Moscow said the situation was complex and not as one-sided as Western nations claim it to be. One of the latest comments on the issues came from Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko on Wednesday. He said alleviating the food crisis would require lifting sanctions imposed on Russian exports and financial transactions. And I'm telling you, sanctions ain't got nothing to do with the growing famine here around the globe. Okay, this whole thing with a famine growing here around the globe. Excuse me. This whole situation with the famine growing. This whole situation with the famine growing around the globe has a lot to do with it being done systematically through these different governments. It says I'm gonna continue reading, as well as removing sea mines from all Ukrainian ports. It says Price dismissed this statement and others made by Russian officials as a series of lies and disinformation. U.S. sanctions are not causing disruptions to Russia's agricultural exports. The fact is that the United States sanctions were specifically designed to allow for the export of agricultural commodities and fertilizer from Russia, he said. Washington reportedly did not consider at one point imposing sanctions against Russian food and fertilizer, even as buyers of Russian products like Brazil strongly objected. U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack said that maybe sacrifices are necessary to address the unjustified war that Russia has chosen to start during a UN meeting on food security in March. Ultimately, Washington decided against such a move and added food products and fertilizer to a list of exemptions. So that's pretty much all I'm going to read there. You pretty much get what's going on here. Let's go to the book of Luke, chapter 8, verse 17. It says, Luke 8, verse 17, for nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad. So whatever is secret is going to come to light. Okay? And this is all coming to light. Okay? The fact that this famine is systematically growing upon the planet, how it's systematically being induced by these governments, that secret is being exposed to the whole world. Okay? And now look, you even got certain insiders from RT.com that's spilling the beans on what's really going on here. Now they're openly admitting that sanctions is not responsible for the growing food prices or the food crisis. Now, let's go from there to the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, verse 8. Book of Ephesians, chapter 2. No. Chapter 5, verse 15. It says, see then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. Right? Because if you walk as a fool, then they're going to pull a quick one on you. You know, it says, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Right, because, our people are not redeeming the time. Well, I'm talking about the 2/3 of our people, especially these false Israelite groups. They're not redeeming the time. They're all caught up into, trying to be an Israelite family man. They're all caught up in the sports, the sports industry. They're not watching the news. Our people, they're all focused on going to clubs and partying and drinking and getting high. They're too caught up in their wickedness to actually, focus on the more important matters. So, what is the scripture saying here? Don't be as them, because the 2/3 of our people are a bunch of fools. They're not watching for the prophecies. They're not watching the news and linking it up with biblical prophecy. Second Corinthians chapter 2 verse 11. It says, lest Satan, which Satan goes back to the Hebrew word shaitan, which means adversary. And the word adversary means a main enemy. We have a main enemy on this planet outside of amongst the heathens. And that main enemy is the biblical Edomites, which is the so-called white man, starting with the so-called elites, trickling down to the rest of their nation, the people. So it says, 2 Corinthians 2 verse 11, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. So lest the so-called global elites get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of their devices. Which, when you look up this word devices, it means a plan or an evil scheme. And there is a evil scheme or an evil plan behind this whole Russian-Ukraine thing. Okay, not only is it being used as a scapegoat for the crisis going on right now, this food crisis, but they're also being blamed they're also being used as a scapegoat for diesel fuel price increases, a diesel fuel shortage. They're also being used as a scapegoat to blame for a fertilizer shortage. They're being blamed for certain food exports not being able to be processed or carried through to other countries. So, just watch, man. Watch as well as pray, like Yahushua said. With that, I'm going to say shalom. Is on to the next one.